Good afternoon, teacher and classmates. Today we're going to make a presentation about open source. First, we're gonna make an introduction, then we're going to answer some of the most common questions about the topic, and finally we're going to present two real-world open source cases. Okay, so the term is defined by the Open Source Initiative as a software that can be freely accessed, used, changed, and shared by anyone. According to Bruce Perens, one of the Open Source Initiative founders, those who don't make their programs open source are finding it difficult to compete with those who do, as users gain a new appreciation of rights they always should have had. He is referring mainly to the right to get a free upgrade whenever your software needed it, also to the right to improve it or fix it yourself, and to the right of using your software on your office workstation, your home desktop computer, and your laptop instead of just one computer. Finally, the open source software development has helped the spread of new and emerging technologies by allowing developers to incorporate third-party source code to use and improve freely. Therefore, we must recognize the contributions that the open source software has been making to the world since its conception. Thank you. Now, we're gonna be answering some of the most common questions about this topic. Thank you.
The most frequent questions about open source software. Can open source software can be used for commercial purpose? Yes, it can. All open source software can be used for commercial purpose. The open source definition guarantees this. You can even sell open source software, but if you buy a software under open source license, you can always use the software for commercial purpose. And further this restriction, it's okay if you make other modifications of the software. How make money from open source software? We have three strategies. The first one is value-added service enabling. In this strategy, organizations give you a added service and support business for a cost. And also some organizations use open source products like a platform. An example for this last will be to purchase a single support license from MySQL and sell local support to a number of customers. Roughly 90% of the customer support requests are probably easily dealt with directly, and the 10% of cost of compliance issues could be passed to MySQL for resolution, and then the solution passed back to the local customers. Then we have market creation strategies. In this strategy, we have the dual product licensing. To explain this strategy, I will give an example. MySQL provides a high-profile example of such a strategy. Millions of free copies of MySQL have been downloaded. Of these, about one customer in every 1,000 has purchased a commercial license from MySQL. This proportion seems small, but it amounts to thousands of fee-paying customers. We also have cost reducing. This marketing strategy, the commodification effect that has occurred with open source, they take advantage of open source in terms of its low cost, reliability, and portability across platforms. For example, Oracle can reduce the overall cost of database implementation for its customers. Other marketing strategy used for organization is to offer products other than software. For example, HP promotes open source in areas that facilitate the deployment of its hardware. The last strategy is leveraging community software development. In this strategy, companies take advantage of the talent of open source community, allows companies to increase development productivity with the added benefit that much work may be done for free. One example of this is Apple's initiative in starting the Darwin open source project. Developed part of its operating system facilitated extra development contributions that for most part are free. In addition, Apple's reputation in the open source community improved.
So the question is, what about software in the public domain? Is the open source public domain has no legal or no copyright. It is free. Open source is software where anyone can use it. Also, they can modify the code.
Difference between free software and open source. Free software has philosophical difference from open source. While the Free Software Foundation always prioritizes ethical aspects, open source highlights technical aspects. According to the GNU Bulletin published in 1989, these four principles define to free software: the freedom to run the program as desired for any purpose, the freedom to study how the program works and change it to the what you want, the freedom to redistribute copies to help others, the freedom to distribute copies of your modified version to third parties. This allows you to offer the entire community the opportunity to benefit from the modifications. Also, software produced from free software should be free too. This does not mean that it cannot be commercial. Freedom 3 and 4 to distribute copies to third parties, with or without modifications, allow this to be done free of charge or at a fee for distribution. The open source initiative has 10 requirements to be defined as open source: free redistribution, source code, derivative works, integrity of the author's source code, without discrimination of individuals or groups, without discrimination of initiative areas, distribution of the license. The license must not be specific to a product. The license must not restrict other software. The license must be technologically neutral. The main difference is that open source is less strict than free software. So in practice, all free software can be classified as open source, but not all open source is free software. As long as the program respects the four special freedoms of free software, it will continue to be considered free whether or not it charges for it. Finally, Richard Stallman affirmed that although free software and open source do not agree on basic principles, they do agree on practical recommendations and on collaborating against proprietary software.
Linux is an open source software created in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. It's one of the most prominent examples of free software and open source collaboration in the world. It was used as a base of a lot of projects and systems that we use nowadays. How Linux works. Linux is like a bridge that takes the commands of users and translates them to hardware. It works like the engine of an operating system. Through it, a programmer can create an infinity of customized operating systems without having to buy them. The most commercial operating systems are Windows from Microsoft and Mac from Apple, who have a price to use them. Everyday examples of Linux. Linux is used in many projects around the world. For example, to create Android, Google have adopted the operating system of Linux to create it. In airplanes, the in-flight movies are embedded into Linux system. The Internet access have an embedded copy of Linux running the web management application. The TV on-screen user interface often runs a version of Linux. Tablets must have open source in there, and many other apps like Facebook, Twitter, Chrome, YouTube were made using Linux. Also, it is used in blockchain technology, for example, Bitcoin, topic that my friend is going to explain coming soon.
Bitcoin is a virtual currency. Being an electronic currency, it's possible to use it for the exchange of goods and services. It differs from other currencies. It being decentralized, so no one controls it. Advantage: it does not belong to any state. Reverse transactions: money cannot be frozen to intervene. Disadvantage: volatility, anonymity, acceptance warranty. It's considered open source because any program in the world from anywhere can create their own modified version of the software. Bitcoin can only function properly if there is a consensus among all users.